You've got McAvaney, Cometti and Roberts. And then you've got these two, nuffies, living in denial. It's Corfe and Horto. Welcome to the Fat Side Podcast.
Well, footy's back and I'm very excited, Mr. Crawford, because we've got Mr. Cal Twomey, AFL.com.au reporter, a bit of a veteran now. Cal, it's been a good, is it 10 years now that you've been there?
Oh, yeah, about that, Adrian. Rob, good to be on the show. I think it's about 10 years now, but a few years before that too was at the Footy record. So clocking up the years, and this year's certainly fair to say different to the other many because it's been interesting and hard in some ways last few months, but looking forward to the footy starting, that's for sure.
Oh, certainly, mate. A 30-year-old veteran. But, mate, what's it been like for you personally? Because work hasn't stopped for you. Really, work's probably ramped up in some respects, given the amount of cuts we've seen across the board in the AFL, the amount of uncertainty that we saw early in those few weeks when Gill had to, unfortunately, cancel the season because of COVID-19. It must be a really strange and eerie time to have worked in the industry. So what's it been like?
Yeah, it has been difficult in a lot of ways, but obviously there's a light at the end of the tunnel that's only a couple of days away now, obviously recording on Tuesday. But, it's created different content, that's for sure. There's been 12 weeks worth of different ideas and things that we've had to find ways to keep people entertained and keep footy fans actually wanting to keep clicking back to AFL.com.au and the AFL Live app because without games, that's obviously the drawing point generally to what brings people to the website. But we found ways to do that, and obviously there's been enough news ticking over throughout the period to keep people engaged enough and to know when footy might be coming back and to know about their team. So there's been enough there. And I guess from a personal perspective, working in a sort of the draft space, I guess, has been a challenge in some ways because a lot of the people that we speak to, or generally speak to, including list managers and recruiters, were for the large part stood down. So that was a different dynamic to work through, but I guess that's where relationships come in over a long period of time, where it makes it a little bit easier to make those contacts and getting contact through a period that's pretty hard on everyone.
Now, tell me, Cal, are you sick of watching classic matches? Have you watched all the classic matches, the best 10 articles? Are you sick of them? Are you ready to actually watch a new game?
I'm ready to watch a new game. I can't say, I've watched some of the fixture throwback stuff that's been on AFL.com.au, of course, and that's kept me entertained. But yeah, I am certainly looking forward to some proper footy and a result that I don't remember or don't know. So there's been some games that I've watched and I thought I can't really remember this game, but that sort of made me drag in and watch it. But eventually it comes to you why that game is being shown. But I'm looking forward to seeing a game and not knowing how it ends.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think we're all in the same camp. Rob, you're having a pretty big night on Thursday, I believe. I think he's going to be taking work off on Friday. That's just how excited he is about the return of footy, Cal.
Yeah, we're celebrating.
Well, what's your plans?
Basically, all my mates who watch footy together, all having a screen together. I've prepared a mega footy trivia because I haven't had much to do over the last sort of week or so, and there might be a few slabs involved. So we'll see how we go.
Nice, I like it.
Yeah, good work, Rob. I'm going away with a few lads as well, and we're going to lock in and watch every single game. So we're looking forward to it. Every game, I think. I'd love to watch every game. Maybe even the Gold Coast. Who are they playing? West Coast, is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah. We'll can that one. I think I'll watch the showdown instead. Just want to talk seriously about this because it's been thrown around a lot, and it's something I'm quite interested in, Cal, and it's the TV deal. And I don't expect you to go into too much detail about it, but I think just the realisation for the general punter, just how important the TV deal is to supplementing all the clubs with revenue that they then put into resources for their football departments, their marketing, media departments, whatever department it is. It's been a bit of a shock to the system for maybe some that weren't aware of how just vitally important that TV deal is to the Codes. So the question I've got for you is, how do you think the clubs are going to adapt? And of course, have already started to adapt because they had no choice, gutting a lot of people at their clubs. But moving forward into the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, what do you think some clubs will do to try and ensure that they can, I guess, limit the damage of not having those revenues coming in for these games and not having memberships, or more so just match day tickets and the revenues that come from match day? How do you see the landscape changing? What's going to happen?
Big question. I'm not exactly sure that they would be that sure about what lies beyond this year, to be honest with you. They're still working out the losses that they're forecasting for this year, and that might change as well as this year goes on. Man, who would have thought 2 months ago that there could be some limited crowds when the games restart in round 2? So I don't think they've actually got through to the point where they're completely sure of the forecasting for 2021 to 2023 to 2024, all that type of time. Obviously, the broadcasting deal underwrites a lot of the competition, and that's why discussions have clearly started to add an extra couple of years to the concurrent deal as it stands. And you know, the AFL has been working towards that, and Gil McLaughlin's spoken about that a little bit. But yeah, I mean, if fans weren't aware previously of how big a role that is in the game and their own clubs, then I think they will be now, because it's clearly such a financial windfall for the game. And it's fair to say there probably isn't the same expectations on next broadcast deal matching the same sort of levels as the previous one when you speak to clubs around that. But hopefully, as the season goes on and more crowds can come through, and obviously members have really stuck by clubs on the whole, they maybe haven't been able to sort of been subjected to the same sort of losses that they might have been forecasting 2 or 3 months ago.
We spoke about it a bit just before about how big the cuts have been, particularly across the assistant coaching ranches. We've seen clubs that have had 10, 20 strong assistant coaches, some on some days. Do you think we're going to actually see a playing coach in the next couple of years? Like, I know Luke Hodges done something like that previously, but do you think we'll actually see a properly recognised playing coach soon?
Or I doubt it. I know there's been things spoken about, particularly even the Crows. I think we're talking about even given they've had to make some changes to their coaching department. Ben Hart won't be there for the restart of the season, and some of the senior players within that group that could maybe take on some more coaching responsibilities in the interim. I still doubt that there's probably enough capacity for a player to put that much time into his coaching career while still playing, while still out on the field. Obviously, the players who can see a coaching future for themselves will do it more or less just for opportunity in themselves. It obviously looks much better on the CV if they become something of a pseudo assistant in the latter parts of their career. But I'm not sure it'll get to the point where we've gone 30 years back to that sort of level.
Do you think it'll be a lot more simplistic in the footy departments? And I won't reference who we spoke to, but it's a prominent AFL coach working on another project, and he explained that he thinks it became a bit of an arms race there for a while, where the footy department was just kind of overthrown with so many staff that it got a little bit silly. It potentially got a little bit out of hand. And I'll just reference something that I see when I'm watching footy on TV, and it's 10 blokes at the front of the box on MacBooks, and it's like, who's that guy? What's his role? What does he do within the footy department? And this particular coach was of the opinion that he's going to enjoy it being a little bit more simplistic again in terms of line coaches and people that come to him with data, knowing that it's gone from, 40 to 45 people down to 25. Do you kind of agree with that, Cal? Do you think there was a point in time where it was kind of spiralling out of control, and it was like, well, if West Coast have gone and done that, and Richmond have to go and do the same thing and implement a new role within the footy department? Do you think it's better that maybe COVID, they've looked at it now and they say, well, maybe this has had a positive impact, and they can see the light and take a few steps back and restructure a few things that perhaps didn't even work for their football department?
Yeah, potentially the ones you mentioned at the end there about the things that didn't work, maybe a chance to say, okay, well, do we cut our losses in this sort of area or with these people or with this focus? Maybe there's some of that. Maybe there's some costs that could otherwise have been streamlined as part of recruiting budgets and through the AFL, maybe there's essential service, in different areas too that could be brought in. I'm not a huge. I know that comment's been made a little bit around the arms race and bringing things back to a basic level, but I'm not sure the game will benefit from that. I mean, I'm yet to see, and we're all yet to see what the evidence will be from less coaches and less people around a footy club, and what that impact could actually have on the game. We see every Friday night, and whether the quality will be diminished because of that. There's arguments to and sort of against that, but yeah, I don't know. I'm not against footy feeding more people and more people being in the footy departments. And
Sure.
every club looks at things differently and structures up a little bit differently. Look at West Coast recruiting team. Prior to this, had one of the biggest recruiting networks, and most of them based, or pretty much all of them based in WA. But then Collingwood, who's on par basically as the other equal biggest club in the competition, had 3 full-time recruiting staff. So everyone looks at it a little bit differently. They might focus more time and energy and expenses into their coaching department. They might, look at their fitness department and say this is a priority for us because of certain things. So I'm not a huge supporter of that view, but then again, we're all yet to see what games actually look like with less assistant coaches. I know I'm like you. Sometimes you look at the box and you say, who's that guy and what's he doing, or what's she doing, what's her role, or what's his role, those type of things. I understand that too, but I'm not exactly sure about whether the game will benefit because of it.
One last one before we actually get into some on-field stuff. Obviously, lack of crowds is, the biggest change we're going to be having this season. Announcements that Queensland's going to have, I think, 25% crowds. I've just seen before that GWS might get to have a few thousand people in play. Who do you think's actually going to benefit the most from having a crowd? Who's not going to change too much? Because I feel like me saying Victorian clubs, it's going to be pretty even. But if you look at the interstate clubs who really thrive on those home crowd advantages, it's going to be a big deal for them. How do you see the lack of or having some crowds playing out?
I'm not sure 1,000 is making a difference too much either way, but
they're very loud.
It'll be like a North game.
Yeah.
You pick your 1,000 most loud supporters and bring them in. Some have to some sort of ballot to get them all in. I'm not exactly sure how it would happen, but you have to think that it's. I mean, you feel for the clubs who've had to go up to do the hubs to begin with, in terms of Freo and Freo and West Coast, and also the South Australian club. So then to have another group of supporters from potentially the Lions, who the Lions supporters were back at the Gabba pretty loud and fiercely last year. It probably would add something for the Lions in the case of the next month if they're able to get some crowds into their games, when there's obviously not much of a chance of their opposing sides having any supporters available to them.
There we go. Now, obviously on field, the most important stuff. Who do you like the look of this year? Everyone's obviously the big obvious ones, Richmond, Collingwood, West Coast is going to be hard for them now with these changes, but who else are you liking to maybe surprise and, go deep into finals this year?
Yeah, I'm on the Port bandwagon. Ken Hinkley said at the start of the year we're coming, and I'm on board with that. I know round one they played the Suns, and the Suns were really bad, really poor and really disappointing. The Suns were missing a few experienced players though, for what it's worth. But yeah, I like what Port's built over the last couple of years. They've got the exciting young talent that's come through over the course of 2 drafts. They've picked up 8 players in this top 25 or 30 picks. So they've managed to sort of change their recruiting style in a very short period of time. And all those guys from last year obviously made an impact. We already saw Mitch Georgiadis in round 1. I like what they've been able to get in defence and in the midfield over the past few seasons too. Whether they really missed the loss of Dougal Howard, we'll yet to know. And it'll be interesting to see what he can do at St Kilda. But I like Port Adelaide as one of those bottom 8 sides. I think Melbourne will be back in the sort of 7 to 9, conversation. I don't know if that's good enough for you, Adrian, or not, but you take it.
Of course, I'll take it. I'm a Melbourne fan. 7 or 8 would be a beautiful result for the D's.
And I think they're good enough to do that. And the midfield additions balance up what they've obviously had there for a couple of years. Still concerned about their forward line to some degree, but we'll wait and see on that one. The other one that I guess you spoke about just before in terms of the premiership contenders. I am on the Brisbane bandwagon. I can't see why they drop off compared to last year. They're fit, they're healthy, they're young, they're hungry. They should be hurting a little bit from the finals exit, the double finals exit last year. They deserve to win a final. They should have won a final, at least one, and they weren't able to do it. So I know they lost to the 2 grand finalists, so there's some sort of respect that comes with that. But I think they'll be right in the frame again this year.
I think we both had Brisbane as sliders, Rob. But yeah, again, it remains to be seen. It's going to be a strange season, but it's going to be really telling first month. I think people will get a good understanding of fitness levels and game plans and things like that. And the shortened quarters, just on that point, Cal, a lot of my friends in WhatsApp groups have been a little bit pissed off about the shortened quarters. They want to maximise as much footy as they can get because they've been deprived for the last few months. But what do you make of that decision? Do you think it's the right decision, given the fact that they had this, I guess, limited second pre-season coming in?
Yeah, I think so. I think given it's a one-off, and this whole year is hopefully just a one-off, in the history of footy, and the AFL's already said that it's not going to be continuing next year. I'm comfortable with it just being this year. Who knows? There's been some severe injury fallout over the last 3 or 4 weeks, and that's just been at training. So fingers crossed we don't get too much of that in round 2 and the next few weeks. But you'd have to say that there is a fear among some clubs that there will be some injury setbacks and some heightened injury levels that might not have been there otherwise. So in respect to that, if you get the game chopped down by 20 minutes over a period of time, I don't think it's a huge drama. Also, if no one told you that it was cut down from 20 to 16, would you really know that much? I don't know. You might realise the scores are a bit lower, but I'm not sure you'd 100% know the difference too much anyway if it wasn't such a big deal and put forward in front of you. So I think the games won't suffer too much because of it. But I hear you, as long as it's just this year.
Yes, of course. Well, it's good for Melbourne fans because one of their biggest gripes is the amount of junk time goals that we concede. So hopefully that'll work in our favour. I just want to throw a blanket across a few teams because we know who your smoky is. It's clearly Port Adelaide. But these are 3 teams that I think are in a similar bracket. And I'm expecting at least one of them to break into the top 8. It's Melbourne, Essendon and St Kilda. I think a lot of people have just kind of thrown them in together in that, say...
What about North?
Oh, maybe a North as well. Yeah,
I think North's going to be good.
No, that's not a bad shout, but let's go with those 4 teams. Out of those 4 teams, throwing North in the equation, which team are you, I guess, more confident about in terms of maybe breaking into that top 8 picture? Because a lot of previews and predictions that I've read, Cal, suggest that a lot of people think they're kind of in no man's land, but they expect at least one of them to get into the top 8. So which one's yours out of those 4?
Yeah, I think it would be Melbourne because they've done it. The other clubs in recent years haven't got close, really. I mean, Essendon hasn't been there for such a long time, even got close to winning a final. North Melbourne's been, I'd be tipping North Melbourne. Probably finish towards the end of the other end of the ladder, to be honest. And St Kilda is still a big unknown for me. I know, new coach and a whole new set of players in terms of the 5 recruits. A couple of those recruits are really high-end players, or one of them definitely is. A couple could be, and one sort of has been a really high-level player. Whether Paddy Ryder gets back to that sort of performance, whether they need to play in that much, be interesting to see what they do in terms of their 2-ruck strategy, given Rowan Marshall came on so well last year. So I'd say that Melbourne, amongst that group, would be the best placed. Essendon, I mean, they could be a reasonable team. They could struggle. I'm not really sure what to expect with the Bombers. And sometimes they perform better when there are no expectations at Essendon. So maybe that might suit them. But they're so injury hit again. Somehow they've went into the break with a few injuries, come out of it looking okay, and then have lost half their forward line again. So it's a disappointing way to how they're going to line up in round 2. I guess the interesting ones, what happens with Sydney? They started the year pretty well. Do they sort of sit just alongside Adelaide and Fremantle in that bottom rung of the ladder? I probably think they do, but Sydney certainly has some, the youth on its side that maybe some of those other clubs don't have.
I'm genuinely concerned about Essendon and Cal, my team. I know you spent a bit of time down there. I'm going to pick your brain for a bit of rapid fire. I'm just going to throw some names at you real quick, and you got to tell me if you think we're going to see much of them this year. Harrison Jones was the first pickup that we had in the last draft. Similar, big, skinny guy. Do you reckon we'll see him all with the absence of Joe Danaher?
No.
No?
He's been injured anyway, so I'd say if Harrison Jones is playing this year, it's probably not a great sign for how Essendon's going in their injury list.
Okay. Big Sammy Draper. Do you think he'll finally get a game off the back of ACL?
I think he will. I think he should have played at the end of 2018. There was a game where in the final game, I think it was Port Adelaide, they played away and they played Matty Leuenberger instead of him. Leuenberger did a calf in the second quarter. It was a missed opportunity not to play Draper that night, but I think Draper will play at some point. I think Andrew Phillips is actually looking pretty good too from what I've seen. So it wouldn't surprise me if Phillips plays, relatively soon. But I think we'll see Draper, yes.
And the last one, Jimmy Stewart, off the back of this groin curse that's been going around the big forwards at Essendon. Do you think we'll see Jimmy back?
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Like, months and months ago, I can't even remember what year it is really, but months and months ago, him and Joe Danaher were on par in terms of their recovery from their respective groin issues. They both went over to Ireland to see the specialist, and one has come back in really good nick. He's an absolute beast, James Stewart. Watch him at training, he's huge. He can move, he can run. He's a pretty solid kicker around the ground too. I think we will see him. It wouldn't shock me to even see him this weekend, but I think Sean McKernan will get the nod ahead of him as he probably should. But what they do with their forward line this week and the next couple of weeks is beyond anyone's guess, really.
Yeah, it's a big conundrum. Hopefully we can get Jacob Townsend just to play full forward again and snag another 3 or 4 goals.
Is this the Sash podcast?
Yeah, it is now. I'm taking over. So,
Okay. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's my Essendon chat done.
I'll put you on the spot then, Rob, because look, COVID-19's been a beautiful thing for a lot of people to reset, restructure their lives. I've done a bit of work in the backyard. My missus is very happy with me, Cal, but it's also created a bit of delusion. Mr. Rob Crawford has gone out and put $50 on Dylan Shield to win the Brownlow, which is very interesting. I'd love to pick your brain and get your thoughts about that.
How many votes has he got?
He's got 3 already. He's already He's already started with 3. So
That's a good point. I'm just looking up how Dill's polled in the past.
Here we go. This is the expert, Crawford.
He got 14 votes last year. It's not bad.
good.
He needs double that to win.
Yeah, but he had an average year and he got 14.
He can be better than he was last year. I like Dill, and I think he's obviously a pretty solid player, pretty good player. I think he, in his own mind, would be confident that he will have a better year in 2020 than he did in 2029 or 2019. But yeah, I don't know about the Brownlow. Look, I hope for your sake he gets up, because it'd mean Essendon's had a pretty good year. Again, that's probably the challenge too. Are Essendon good enough for him to win the Brownlow medal?
No.
Well, I mean, if Freo are an example, you don't need a good team. You just need to be the best player in that team by a long way, as Nat Fyfe has been.
Or the best player in the league. That's the only drama.
That too.
I'm not sure Dill's that, but he's a quality player. And yeah, everyone talks about the kicking, I think, is probably the thing that he can address, and that's probably a fair thing to maybe question or throw up. But what he can add to that midfield with that genuine speed and eye-catching blitz out of the midfield and out of the centre square is a centre. I think the year before he joined the Bombers, wasn't he right up the top of the competition for centre clearances? So
yeah, when he went all Australian, he was huge.
Yeah, so it's a big call, Rob. I'm not sure I'm with that, but
So he's deluded. Great. Good. I'm glad we could confirm that. Now this one, I'm not turning it into the Debrief podcast, but this is a big story because this is a very talented player that has hardly kicked a footy professionally in the last 5 years, Harley Bennell. Been so much talk about him, Cal, in the last 3 months, and he's come back into training down there at Casey with the Ds, and apparently he's absolutely flying. Simon Goodwin wants to play him, and I think it's now just a conversation between Harley, Goody, Alan Richardson, and probably the medical department to see if he's ready to take on the rigours of senior AFL footy again. As a Melbourne supporter, and I think I speak for most Melbourne supporters, we just want to see this bloke play. He is so exciting, and when he was up and about at the Gold Coast, he was a tremendous player. He was one of the best players in the comp, really. He was coming on quite strongly when he was there with Gary Ablett. Would you roll the dice with him? Would you play him? Is it as simple as just getting him out in the park and managing his minutes, maybe playing him for 60, 65% of game time and then just incrementally building his loads up a bit? Or would you sit him out for the next couple of weeks and just make sure he's cherry ripe?
To me, it sounds like it'd be a surprise now if he didn't play this week, just the way the conditioning has come through in terms of the media appearances from the Ds over the past week or so. Obviously, he's been back on the track. As you mentioned, they clearly had pigeonholed him for a return about mid-year, and it looks like that's happened. It's just that he's missed only a game. So, look, one of the great stories, if you can get up and get going, not just get up and play, but actually get going as a player and see the sort of performances that we saw, in those first few years of the Suns when he was explosive, kicking goals. What did he kick? 6 goals against Geelong one night or something crazy like that from 30-odd touches. So he's about the only bloke taking votes off Gary Ablett at one point in Suns games. So, look, he's amazing talent. And I love that Melbourne had a crack at him and for such a low risk option, really. I mean, in terms of money, in terms of what they gave up for him, which was nothing. He's obviously at a pretty base level wage, I think, too. So clearly Melbourne hasn't had to give up too much apart from its resources to get himself right. And he's clearly jumped on board with that too. So, yeah, I'll be playing him and getting him into that side because imagine if he does go well, it does come off. Like we talked about, the wingmen that they brought to the club being the potential missing pieces, and they are quality players, but neither of Adam Tomlinson or Ed Langton has that genuine dash and pizzazz that Bennell has, and probably no one in the competition does. And to be fair, we're not sure if Harley will have his own dash and speed that he did, a couple of years ago too. So we'll wait and see, but I'll be playing him, yeah.
Well, he might be the first AFL player to play a game without having any calves in his legs. So, best of luck to him. Cal, you're always the man who knows all the youngsters coming through in the draft around the competition. Whether it's someone who may have been picked up a couple of years ago and hasn't had a chance yet, or is it one of the brand new freshies? Who are we looking at around the comp that's really going to just walk in and have a big impact?
Oh, good question. I'd just move on from drafts, Rob. So as soon as one's done, I just on to the next one.
I've seen you after draft week, by the way.
Yeah.
It's a big celebration because it's very rigorous work. Yeah, you're in your pomp 4 days in after draft.
Yep.
No, you are.
Hayden Young would be one for the Dockers. He didn't play round one. Had a little bit of a quad issue that he carried through the pre-season out of last year, or it was just a little bit of a lingering one, but he could easily, we look at the Dockers and we think they need some skill. They need some foot skills and actual ball use coming out of their half back line, just anywhere across the ground. Even Justin Longmuir after round one said, we clearly have a lot of work to do still on the front of our skill level. So Hayden Young is probably the best kick out of last year's draft. And we obviously haven't seen him yet, but I think he'll come in and do some great things early on. From the year before, I'm looking forward to seeing Ned McHenry play for Adelaide, who's a first-round pick. He didn't get a game last year through injury, basically, the second half of the season, just as he was coming good. We know how good that first 20 in the 2018 draft pool is and looks like being. Obviously, Connor Rosie and Sam Walsh and Jack Lukosius is in there as well, and there's some real talent. Xavier Dersma has done great things in his first year. So then McHenry was picked before Xavier Dersma, so looking forward to seeing him for the Crows. And obviously Isaac Rankin as well. Once he actually finally gets going, I think it's been really sad, the injuries that he's suffered in his first, we're pushing 2 years at the Suns, but 18 months at the Suns because, the kid didn't have an injury until he got there. So unfortunately just hasn't stood up to the rigours of, the demands, of AFL training, at least at this level. And he's still a couple of weeks away. So hopefully we get to see a bit of Isaac in the back half of the season.
Wait, hang on. Where's Keziah Pickett?
Come on. What's going on?
We saw him in round one. We're all fans of Cozzy. And Luke Jackson, we'll see how he goes along too. But I don't know. Where do you think Luke Jackson should play?
It's a difficult one because a lot of people on forums and on the debrief speak about him being the ultimate utility player because he's so versatile. And I think that it was you, Cal. You were saying he's like a Grundy type. He can follow up and play as a mid as well. I don't know. I think for me personally, to begin with, once he gets into the team, I'm not expecting him to play maybe the first month of footy, but I'd just like to see him be a second pinch hitter in the ruck and just plying his trade or learning his trade from Max Gorm, one of the best rucks in the comp. Makes sense, and he can maybe just rest forward. That's probably how I would integrate him into the team before we start throwing Luke Jackson's magnet around too much. That's the way that I look at it initially, but I'm not a coach. I'm just a fan. But I am excited about him because he looks insanely athletic, and it came as a big surprise, Cal, that Melbourne picked him up at pick 3, knowing that there was a lot of great outside players, and it's something that Melbourne lacked, and hopefully we've figured that out with Tomlinson and Langdon, who you just said before. But was it a big surprise for you that they took him at 3 at the time?
Not by the time he got taken, but in the lead up, it was a little bit surprising that he was coming in so hot. Basically, like everyone wanted a piece of him, and it wasn't just Melbourne in the end though, because I did a story for the day of the draft or the night of the draft on. I spoke to 10 or 11 other clubs around who they would have taken at pick 3 because everyone knew who was going at pick 1 and 2, and half of them said Luke Jackson, and the half who didn't have Luke Jackson at pick 3 had him in the top 5. So it's certainly they weren't one out in ranking him that high, and a lot of other clubs viewed him in the same sort of position. So I mean, it is rare for a ruckman to go that early. I think he was the highest ruckman taken since Nick Nat or something like that. So that was 10 or so years ago too. So it's obviously uncommon, but they hope that he can be more than just a ruckman. He can be an all around the ground player, and if he's a bit of Adam Goods utility type of player, we'll wait and see. But obviously he's a competitor, and he's didn't have the same footy background as maybe some of the other players and tools. So you mentioned his forward line work. I think he does need to work a little bit on his marking before he becomes that forward option. He's not a huge contested marker for a player his size. So maybe some of those, he can be a little bit flat-handed sometimes when he's grabbing it. So, and that's just judging on last year. I haven't seen them train a whole lot over the summer and into the mid-season break. But that has been sort of something that he's had to focus on.
That was nice of Cal then, Rob, not to tell us who Melbourne took before Nick Naitanui in that draft. But anyway, we'll move on.
What's he?
Mr. Jack Watts. Just on Jack Watts, is he fit again?
Good question. I think he is, isn't he?
I don't know. He doesn't play for my club anymore.
He's the missing link for Port Adelaide now, isn't he?
I think he'll be going to the hub, and I think they'll be calling upon most players over the course of that month in the hub. So I'd suggest Jack would be in there. But again, when we talk about Port Adelaide, if they're going to really rise up, he's probably going to be an icing on the cake type of player, isn't he? Rather than the guys who are the base of that charge.
Yeah, and to be fair, Rob, I know I've absolutely crucified Watsy over the journey, but before he did his leg, he was playing pretty good footy.
All right, wrap up here, Carl. We're just going to do a bit of rapid fire predictions. I'll put you on the spot here. So who's going to win the flag?
Richmond will win again.
Brownlow medal?
Dylan Shield.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. Great work.
Who did I have for Brownlow? I've forgotten now. I'll go Lockie Whitfield.
Wooden spoon?
That will go to... I don't know. I'm always very careful with my wooden spoon predictions because I've got people at every clubs that sort of...
You don't want to hurt their feelings.
There's a little bit of that. I think I've tipped Freo at the start of the year.
Okay. Who's winning the Coleman?
That will be Jack Rewalt.
Rising Star?
Rising Star.
Say it. Oh.
Yeah.
And
Aussie.
What's going to be the headline of the year?
Joe
Danaher to the Demons.
No, I think it would be like suspension rules Shield out of Brownlow win.
Perfect.
I'd love to see that. right in the last round as well, Rob, round 17. He just clipped someone in the final quarter.
Yeah.
Just a tiny little,
Yeah. He breaks the disposal record with 17 games, and in the last game, he just whacks someone.
Yeah.
You are absolutely kidding yourself, Rob Crawford. Seriously. But before we go, there's another man on this call, Rob, who does a better podcast than us. Let's be honest about that. The AFL Exchange with yourself, Cal, Mitch Cleary, and Riley Beveridge. Good listen. I enjoy it. Please give it a plug for all the people out there that aren't aware of it and where they can find it, of course.
Oh, they can find it anywhere that a podcast drops. But yeah, it's been good fun to do that over the past couple of years. We've gone through the last 12 weeks. We aren't always talking about footy anyway, but it certainly has been less footy over the past 12 weeks anyway. We sort of like to throw it around a little bit and get a little bit of footy culture in there too, and some things that are completely unrelated to footy. I think on this week's show we talked about Chris Gale stalking my Instagram feed a few years back. So that's the sort of content that's a true story, by the way. But yeah, so that's what's on AFL Exchange, apart from obviously the news and all the latest footy stuff. So click on to afl.com.au to find that one with Mitch, Riley and myself.
And Spotify and Apple and all the
they're all
podcast
there.
apps.
All the
Yeah,
places.
everywhere.
There you go. Great plug. Enjoyed that. Well, Cal, it's been an absolute pleasure, mate. We are very excited to watch footy, even though it's crowdless. As I said earlier, we've been deprived. It's been great to have you on. We really appreciate your expertise and your opinions because, Rob, we are nuffies and this man is an expert. He's a 30-year-old veteran, as I said, so thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Been fun. Good luck for the show for the rest of the year and go Deal Shield.